A Torah Yida Klicheres, a Torah testifies on Klicheres, Sheina Yotzim Yidei Dafyim. It doesn't actually, the absorption does not go out of its walls forever. What about materials made out of wood, stone, and aluminum? These are also different materials, different than. So aluminum is a type of material that's new. They did not have it at times of Chazal. So that becomes a question, how we actually scale it, how we actually define it. Kli eitz would be a wooden vessel, kli even a stone vessel, kshar kelim, and other types of vessels. The Torah does not explicitly mention them regarding kashering them. So it's decided by the poskim, by the halachic codifiers and authorities. He creates be'evan yesh lahem hechsher, a wooden vessel and a stone vessel you can kasher. V'dinam deim l'din kli mateches, and their halacha would be similar to that of a metal vessel. Gam kli aluminum, also an aluminum vessel. Din shavel din shar kli mateches is similar to other metals. Regarding the idea of kashering it. What about gumi, which would be rubber and plastic? That's also interesting because you didn't have that in the times of Chazal. Halacha zayin. B'yameinu im yitziras chamarim chadashim shelo yoyim mekedem. We have new materials, new situations. We have to know how to actually handle them. Kamei gumi, for example, rubber, plastic, shein lanu aliyim kabbalah m'divrei apostle m'shein. We don't have a kabbalah, we don't have a tradition from our forefathers, from the previous, way back when, from the halachic authorities, because they didn't have it in that generation. Some say one should not kash such materials because we don't have an actual tradition that talks about it. Many halachic authorities hold we could run them through the Hagala process, just like you would boil out a metal vessel. This is a general principle. We're concerned that the vessel will not survive the trip if we're going to put it through a boiling water experience and it's going to, let's say, melt, or it's going to shrink, or it's going to break. Then also lagilik, then you're not allowed to do hagala ki yesh lachshe sheyivcha ben yiskalka lakli le'yegelenu yosef. Because when we're saying you're going to be concerned, you're not going to do a good job, and you're not going to end up doing a proper hagala. Some say you can kasher these materials, namely rubber and plastic, for year-round use, but not for Pesach. For Shari Yisurim, meaning for year-round, you could. Again, for Pesach, we're always a little bit more stringent. Now we turn the page to Kuf Yud Ches. We don't kasher them for Pesach. Because the cost of a rubber, let's say a rubber mold or a plastic type of utensil, is not a lot of money. For a few dollars, we can buy a brand new one for Pesach, and that's the proper thing to do. For other Yisurim, Derech Moshel, and Kli Cholov, let's say, if it's a dairy vessel used for meat, by mistake, one would be allowed to kasher them in the case of a small loss. I think we actually got up to here last time. Sorry, just passed it. Okay. Halacha Ches. Any questions so far? No. Okay. Gam din klizuchuches le'nisbash b'Torah. Luchas about a glass vessel, also Torah doesn't explicitly speak about. Yesh sovrim shezuchuches einei tzricha hagola. Some say, we spoke about the three opinions. I think we did cover this last week. I'm sorry. I'll say it again. But we have the Sfardim. Some Sfardim hold that glass does not absorb, and some say it absorbs and can be kasha, and some say it cannot be kasha. The yesh sovrim shezuchuches einei tzricha hagola. It's enough just to rinse it. Ki halak of a kasha. It's strong and smooth. It doesn't actually absorb. Some say that glass is like metal. It does absorb and can be kasha through agala. Some say that glass is like cheres. Since it comes from sand, from according to this latter shita, which is the most stringent, in actual one could not kasher a glass vessel. Just like you cannot kasher an earthenware vessel. So what do we actually do in practice? So Ashkenazim have been lahachmer kishita achreinu linyan shein nachshek klitz chukas lePesach. To be stringent not to kasher a vessel for Pesach, aval inyan shavi surim. But from other Isurim, the year-round kashering, they're makel, they're lenient to kasher. Amnon Rebnei Sfard, most Sfard Neagim Shenkli Zchukas Tzich Mechshach LePesach. The Sfardim are very lenient, and they say you don't even have to kasher glass even for Pesach. As I said to you last time, nice, easy to be a Sfardi on Pesach, but then comes for the Shalom, and you get it for the crack of dawn for a whole month. Pesach. So it's a two-way street. If you're going to go the Sfardic route, you got to go all the way. For those that have that custom. Okay. Al pi apostol saving it is hook same sich hechsher mishar yisrael mish nagam likus chukas vishenim and anachrim. So those like these Sfardim, they could buy used glassware from a non-Jew that was used for non-kosher. Mishab shavim, they would rinse them out, scrub them clean, and that's it. It's good to use. Mishab shavim lachat tvila, after tvila, first you have to table it, of course. Bli hagala, without hagala. Yesh nagam oid. Some people have a minute. V'shtamsh b'kaises chutzim like chol common. They can use a glass vessel for hot liquid. V'shtamsh b'kaises m'keim hot. So it's possible. Let's use that same glass cup for hot meat after rinsing it and cleaning it. Again, that would be those Sfardim that hold that glass does not absorb. For us, for Ashkenazim, they would say that wouldn't be appropriate because we hold that glass does absorb. By the way, for those in the catering business, most agencies will allow kosher caterers to take glasses that were used from a non-kosher party, wash them thoroughly, clean them, and just use them for cold for a kosher party, like a one-off party. The party's not going to last for 24 hours. It's going to go 5-6 hours. And it's used for cold only, so it's not absorbing. And you have the opinion to hold the glass doesn't absorb, and it's just being used for cold. It's only on a temporary basis, so it's permissible. If it's clean, obviously. Okay. Now, if someone, by the way, it's also applicable. If someone, let's say, is going out somewhere, going to get a drink, you can use a glass cup if it's clean. However, you cannot get a sharp, let's say, a sharp thing like lemon or lime put inside. So that's a problem with the knife. But if it's just a glass cup itself, it's okay. Yeah. Yes. Yes, because your drink is not going to sit in there for 24 hours. If you're having a sharp drink with an alcoholic beverage, then it's a little bit different. Although we say malicha l'kelim, but it could be a little bit different. But generally speaking, if it's not a sharp drink, it's no problem. Okay. So then alcohol would absorb within 18 minutes. It's sharp. But sharp refers to something that's very strong. So it's fine. Radish, garlic, onion. What's that? Okay. Halacha Yud. If someone bought a glass vessel from a nachri, tzarech machshim needs to be kashed. One should not use a glass vessel for meat and dairy. This is the Ashkenazi tradition. But after the fact, the Nesach Lizachuchis show Yehudi if the vessel got not kosher. I feel as we tell them, even according to their opinion, Yesh Lakal Akshida went to kasher. We said before, those Sfardim that have the tradition, they'll use the same glass dish for meat and dairy at separate times. Of course, they're cleaning them in between. As long as they scrub them and rinse them in between usages. Now it's time for a story. My teacher, my principal, when I was a kid, I had time cement for Blessed Memory. He was a student in the yeshiva here in 770 in the 1940s. And the Rebbe walked in at that time. It was not so easy to get started. There were not many Svardim around. So the Rebbe walked into the town for the study hall and asked if anybody has a certain sefer. Now the cement had that sefer. They lent it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe at that time was known as the Ramash. It was before the Rebbe became Rebbe. It was during the lifetime of the Frierdiker Rebbe. After a while, it's not, the way I remember the story was that he went to the Rebbe and asked the Rebbe to the Sefer, back, the back. But then he had like regret or remorse. And he said to the Rebbe, I don't need it. So the Rebbe said to him, regarding a Sefer, we don't use the words I don't need it. We don't say I don't need it. And there was a Yid, in Boston as well. His name was Moshe Gurkhan. Chassidus Yid was passed away this year at age 90. A very Chassidus Yid. So when the Rebbe was brain during the weekday, like we get Kitzle, get Shvat, known as the Yom Depragas, the Chassidus Yom Tovim, we would drive in from Boston to New York to come to the Pabrengen. I get a ride with him. Then he would drive back. Like a 3.5 hour, 4 hour ride each way. And he had a big station wagon in the 80s. The station wagon was huge, very long. There was a big gas gauge, so it would get up 9 miles a gallon. After the Fabrengen, we would go down Empire Boulevard to New York Avenue, wanted it to the gas station to fill up the gas. And whatever would end every Fabrengen with the statement that the Sheikh is coming, ahead of Yemen Amamsh, the life with the Rebbe, the reality. So when it came time to paying for the gas, the Gurkha say the Rebbe just said that Mashiach is coming. And so it says, I'll pay with the credit card. By the time the bill comes, Mashiach will be here for a long, long time already. That's what he used to say. One more story about Boston. I'm a Bostonian. By now. So my parents lived in Muncie. My father's company had been moved. He got a new job in Boston. So he had to move to Boston. And it was a big thing because we were living in Muncie in a very poor community, and then Boston did not have the same community. But the Rebbe told my parents to move. My mother was concerned about the chinuch, state of Jewish education. My mother told my mother not to be concerned, not to be worried about it. It will turn out okay. But Boston is known as the Athens of America because you have all the universities there. My father, our last name is Hanoka. So in the middle of a Chassidish Fabrengen, a heated Fabrengen, my father would say, the Rebbe sent Hanukkah to Yavan, to Greece. And he would also say, my father loved these Chassidish one-liners. He would say that in the middle of Seil Chaim, it's a lube job, just like you bring in the vehicle, the mechanic, you change all the fluids, right, to get everything going. He says, Al-Chaim is a lube job. It's a Lubavitcher job on the system. It cleans out all the unwanted particles, and we get a fresh start. We can run the engine properly.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so one time in college, I took one of my dairy pans and I literally put a steak on it, and I was like, it's gone. I just threw it out. What could I have done in that situation?
So it depends.
So upsetting. Such a nice steak.
I thought she was gonna say it was such a nice pan, and she was like, no.
No, the pan was from Walmart. All my stuff was from
Steak could have been worth more money.
Walmart. Yeah, literally.
So it depends. If the pan was clean and not used within the last 24 hours, obviously putting it there is a mistake, excuse the pun. But after the fact, if it was not used within 24 hours, the steak still would be kosher to eat.
And this is like,
But if it was used within the last 24 hours, the steak would not be kosher to eat. Now the pan would still need to be kosher. Whether or not you could kosher the pan is a question, but generally speaking, under those circumstances, one would be able to kosher the pan.
And how would I kosher it?
So the answer to that is it depends. First of all, it depends what kind of pan it was, if it's a Teflon pan or not. But generally speaking, a frying pan, if it's a frying pan, I don't know, was it a frying pan? Or was it a frying pan, generally speaking, needs what's known as Liban Gum, or needs complete fire, which is hard to do but possible. If it's made out of Teflon, it's not possible. But in the situation that you're describing, there's a leniency. I'll explain to you what goes on with this. there's a principle in halacha known as tam kolosh. Tam kolosh means a weak taste. So in the case you're describing, you had a kosher dairy pan that was clean, did not have actual dairy in it now, but had the dairy absorbed in the vessel. And now we have meat going into this vessel. So we have a problem, obviously, because we have an absorption of meat and dairy, right? So the halach in that case, because the dairy and the meat did not go in simultaneously, they went in at separate times, one could kasha such a vessel with boiling water, meaning one step down kasha. It wouldn't actually be live fire, with boiling water would be enough, because what's going to remain in the vessel is only going to be tam kolosh, would be a very weak taste and not strong enough to actually make bas b'chalas. That's a special leniency you only have in a situation where it was a kosher vessel and you had the milk and meat going in at separate times. Pointed out that even if it was a ben yaimi, even if it was used within the last 24 hours. Some opinions say it has to be, but not a ben yaimi. But anyway, that's the answer to that. So it's possible. In that case, it would have been possible to kasha the dust. Okay. Let's go on. Halacha Yud Aleph. Oifen hachshodas klei zechukas. How do we kasher a glass vessel? The mikra shemuta lachshira commission is barlil in a situation where one could kasher it, as we said before, could do a halon. In mishtamish klei zechukas in machal yisr cham. If someone used the glass vessel hot, shayat zeledis by machshira kederch shimushay. You kasher with boiling water, but mayim chamin. In mishtamish by bitzayin, used it for cold. Achitach, and that's like the addition is a b'seichel meitles. But it was used for cold, but the forbidden substance sat in there for 24 hours. Then you can kasher to miloi v'iroi. Or if nach shorot miloi v'iroi kevahalan. Miloi v'iroi works as follows. After cleaning the vessel, mikol shor from any remnants of food that are stuck there. You can only kasher something that has a wide mouth, so you can clean it. Especially you can clean. Then you fill up the vessel with water to the top. Or you can put this vessel that you're kashing into another vessel bigger than it, fill up with water. Till the smaller vessel needs kashing is going to be totally immersed in water. After the vessel stayed in the water for no less than 24 hours, you pour out the original batch of water, we fill up with new water, another 24 hours, still to do the third time. If you didn't change the water all 3 times, it's considered as if it's all been sitting for 1 day. You have to then soak it another 2 times, 2 24-hour periods. These 3 soakings do not have to be consecutive. So you can have one done on Thursday, one done on Sunday, one done the next following Wednesday, whatever. And this is all talking about kasher and glass from other Isurim. We already said we don't kasher glass for Pesach. I feel based even in this way. If you cannot find glass vessels, in the case of Pesach, one does not have vessels for Pesach. You can kasher vessels that were not used for hot. Okay, we're up to Halacha Gimel. Any questions? Okay. What about porcelain? Other materials. Please clip harsina, v'chein kideris amo, which is metal that's covered. Nistapko b'poskim shebadino kikucheres. Some say has din of cheres. V'chein in nachshim, you can't kash them. But makan hefsed yesh lisha sheres chochem. If there's a case of financial loss, you can ask Bishal by a rav. Clay pyrex, which is strong glass. Nistapko b'poskim dino kikucheres. So there's a bit of a debate in the poskim. Does it have the status of glass or not? What's the halacha? Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was a normal question. I was saying, I thought that pirates couldn't be.
But it's a machlokes. It's better not to, but if someone's in a case of need, they can ask a shayla. There's a machlokes about it.
I really just thought you could caution them, quite honestly. So,
So when we study halacha,
I'm just
we get
waiting.
surprises. We learn there are certain things that we can do that we thought we're not allowed to do. And we might also learn things that we thought we're allowed to do, we're not supposed to do. There's a story with the Rebbe. There was a Yid, his name was Rav Chaim Tzvi Goldzweig. He was a world-renowned kashrus expert. He worked for the OU. He's from Chicago. He had connections with Lubavitch's Davin's father. I think he also Davin Sachari. He was in Yechidus by the Rebbe some 50 years ago. And the Rebbe asked him to speak for Neshei Chabad about kashrus. So he said to the Rebbe, they're all Yerei Mishleim, these are holy, God-fearing women. What am I going to tell them already? So the Rebbe said, they're being machmir on things they don't have to be machmir on. And they're being makel on things they shouldn't be makel on. So the clarity, the libra, the crispness, the awareness, it brings about more balanced living so we can invest our energy in places where it counts, and we can also tone down the Jewish neurosis. My own words, the Rebbe didn't say this. Jewish neurosis about worried about things you don't have to worry about. Because there are plenty of things that are permissible, some things are not, so we have to know. Okay. Halacha Yodalid, Milvad Hayavdal Ben Sugi Chamorim Shemehem Nasla. Besides the difference between the materials that vessels are made from, Yeshev Dagam Kim Ben Tzuras Shimush HaKelim. There's also a difference between how the vessel is used. So based on that, we're going to be able to determine how the vessel should be kashed based on its usage. We said 3 types of kashering are enumerated. Libun, which is fire. Libun also means white. Hagala, boiling water. Hadacha b'mayim, cleaning, cold rinsing. V'aklalu kibele kachbata, the way someone gets absorbed. That's that's how the vessel gets purged. I said last time story about the Rebbe and Merker Shlichus. I did Torah lift like Ebola when they're busy spitting out, giving out Torah, they're not going to be absorbed in the surroundings. We also spoke about it says in Shulchan Aruch, someone needs to rectify something that was a misdeed that was done with lots of fervor. So the way they do that is by taking a mitzvah with lots of fervor, like the Maimar Atashitim, right? So they're investing. That's how they take out the bad absorption by investing themselves, throwing themselves into the mitzvah with tremendous fervor. It's a cleansing experience. Now we have another story comes to mind. The Yotzes Kislev, the first year when they were celebrating the tremendous miracle of the Rebbe freed from prison. I think that the story was there was a Malamed, there was a teacher there, his name was Kusi the Malamed, I think Kusil. And he was an Armamah, he's a poor person, but he was tremendously so grateful for the miracle of the Rebbe was free from prison. They were dancing around a barrel of mashka. The Rebbe was there. This is the year after. And then his hat was, he was jumping and dancing with so much exuberance, his hat was bobbling and then it fell into the mashka. So the Alter Rebbe picked up the hat and put it on Malamed's head and said, Yeshua is Bereishai. The hat of salvation shall be on his head. And then Kuti became he made a lot of money, became very wealthy. So the next year, another pavilion and another chassid. Remember the story? So he wanted to figure he could try this. He's dancing, he's hats bobbling on his head and this and that till it falls into the mashke. But the Rebbe didn't say that because it has to come mitzad psichal, it has to come from within. Which brings us to another story. That's the danger when I start telling stories. We open up the filing cabinets and more files come out. So there was actually my mashpia. Rabbi Yitzchak Springer, he was a spiel when I was in 77. Oh, this is he loved the Bachram, like he was child, like an only child. And he really meant it. He's a real genuine person. Anyway, so he was from Eretz Yisrael, from Israel. His father unfortunately passed away before he got married, but he was a Muslim then. So when it came time to the chasana, he got married in the early 60s, and he asked the Rebbe to be Masadi Kedushin, to perform the actual ceremony. That time the Rebbe kind of stopped, around 1962, 3. So he said to the Rebbe, like with all earnestness, he says, my father's not coming to the wedding, I can't get married. How can I get married? In other words, he called the Rebbe my father. The Rebbe, he asked the Rebbe to be Masadi Kedusha to perform the marriage ceremony. The Rebbe said, I'm not really doing it anymore. He said to the Rebbe, my father's not coming to the wedding, how can I get married? I can't get married. And the Rebbe relented. The Rebbe agreed to do it. A few months later, there was another chassan who was getting married, heard the story, and tried the same thing, and the Rebbe didn't accept it. Because it came down through the Klei Seichel, it's through Cheshbainis. Which brings me to another story. This is a bit on the humorous side. The vision to Rebbe has a minhag that if his medrash was on the bottom, and on top he had a dormitory. So if a bacher, one of the boys in the yeshiva, didn't come to daven, he would affect him nach, meaning he would inquire about his well-being, and they said that the bacher is not feeling well. So the Rebbe says, "Gabay, again, machana bikkur cholim. We're going to do bikkur cholim after davening." So the Rebbe goes up to the dormitory after davening and sees a bacher lying in bed, and he's long-faced. He looks sad. So the Rebbe says to him, "Bacher, was is?" So he says, "Rebbe, ich bin heiserig. So I'm not. I've got a cold. I'm not feeling well." So the Rebbe says to him, "Was bist du so traurig? Why are you so sad?" So he says to the Rebbe, "Ich kann nicht gehen in mikveh. I can't go to the mikveh." He truly felt a loss. So the Rebbe said to him, "Ich werde Rabban in Zinen. I'm going to have you in mind when I table." The bacher was very much placated. So the story went around in the dormitory. A few months later, another bacher wasn't feeling well. The Rebbe asked Gabbai, "What's with their bacher?" And he said he's not feeling well. And the Rebbe says to Gabbai, "I'm going to visit the sick." After davening, the Rebbe comes up to this other bacher's room and sees him lying in bed, and he remembers the whole story. He says, "The bacher was this." He says, Rebbe, ich bin heiserig. I'm not feeling well." So the Rebbe sees his long face. The Rebbe says to him, "Was bist du so traurig? Why are you so sad?" So he says to the Rebbe, ich kann nicht gehen in mikveh. Rebbe, can I go to the mikveh? So the Rebbe says to him, "My Gabe is going to have you in mind when he travels." He goes to the mikveh. The idea is that it should come from within. Once it comes already through the Klei Seichel, it's already a different product. It's not the same thing. Okay. Let's go weiter. Another story about the mikveh. Someone came to the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoelish, and they asked him for a bracha, make a shaman, that it should rain. Because in order to have a mikveh, you have to fill up the pit of the mikveh, which is under that place where people actually table, with rainwater. Right before then, someone came to him with an opposite request, bracha that it should be dry, because they had to cut the wheat for the matzah. And the halachas has to be dry for 3 days before they cut the wheat. He turns to the yid with the matzah, he says, "And did I take a rim of in 3 days you'll have what you need," meaning it's not going to rain for the next 3 days. Then he turns to the other yid and he says, "No, after that you'll have what you need." And after he cut the wheat, it started to rain. Okay. There's a story actually my parents had with the Rebbe Shavuos. My parents lived in, after my father became a Lubavitcher, the Rebbe told him to finish his PhD. After my parents got married, they moved to State College. My father was finishing up his PhD, he's already teaching. So there was a Rav, his name was Rav Shai Yosef Cohen from Haifa. He was traveling through Pennsylvania, I don't know exactly why, and he had to stay over somewhere. So the only family in the middle of Pennsylvania, in the State College area, that kept Chol Yisrael were my parents. So he stayed over there and for a few nights, and then he had come back to New York and he had yechidus with the Rebbe. Unbeknownst to my father and mother, that is, he told the Rebbe that he was very, very taken by the fact that in the middle of a spiritual wasteland, you have your Chassidim are keeping Chol Yisrael, such a high standard of kashrus. So a month later, my parents were at the Rebbe for Shavuos. This must have been like 1966 or 67, possibly 65. Probably 65, 60, one of those years. And by Koshel Bracha, the Rebbe said to my father with a smile, I have warm regards to you from Rav Shaya Shuf Kohen. Okay, kashering through fire. Halacha tezvav. L'chein kli sheshimush le'deyesh mamish, a vessel that's used for fire itself. L'loydei mine without any water. Derech moshel, for example, shpudim shetel maleim vasa, like a spit that you barbecue for meat. Siri afio, or baking pans, v'kadei machshos me'deyesh mamish. The kashering through fire itself. That's called Liban. The way of Kashmir Liban is as we said. You put the vessel in the fire. So you put burning coals on the until the vessel gets hot. Only through this kind of heat can you kasher the taste that's absorbed in the vessel. One does not have to kasher the whole vessel at one time. When it comes to kashering, you can kasher a vessel in parts. In contrast to the laws of tevilah, immersion in a mikveh, to immerse something in a mikveh has to be totally immersed. We need a total immersion. But when it comes to kashering, you can kasher it in parts. Even if someone only used half a vessel, it's not enough just to kasher that half. One has to kasher the entire vessel. Some say after the vessel has been kashered, the minhag is to rinse it with cold water. After kashering something with water, for sure you have to you have to rinse with cold water. But after fire, some say that. Some say not. There's another kind of kashering known as liban kal. Liban kal means a lighter form of kashering. Liban kal is really analogous to hagala. Practically speaking, liban kal is about a temperature of 500 degrees for 1 hour. Liban gomor would be like 900 degrees. So a real self-cleaning in an oven, not just an air clean or whatever, not like air dry. A real self-clean would be 900 degrees. That's a proper kashering. Liban gomer. Well, liban kal would be about 500 degrees. Liban zeshin is part of the milo liban chomer. Ulam yesh gamkin liban kal. Is an easier type of liban. It's called liban kal. Kamakish dai bech shagola. Anytime when you're allowed to kash something with hagola, dai bech liban kal gamkin. One could also kash that tea with liban kal. There are situations, this gets to your question, by the way, it's what I said earlier. There are times when you can kasher liban kal instead of liban chomer. For example, if something was absorbed through permissible way, permissible materials absorbed. The example you had was, you had a frying pan. It was not used in 24 hours. It absorbed permissible material. The problem was it was in the wrong place, right? Permissible absorption, it's kosher meat. It wasn't Isser then. It was permissible material. For example, meat by itself or dairy by itself. So how would one do liban kal? So you put like a piece of string on the outside of the vessel, and you put coals inside until the straw burns on the outside. By the way, you could have also put your pan, the kasher in that case, in the oven at 500 degrees for 1 hour. The kasher, that would be liban kal. If it could be kasher with liban kal, and the example you had where it went in as kosher meat, that would qualify. But if it was not actual trace, then it would need liban gomer. It would need a much stronger type of heat. Could put coals on the outside. Liban kal zeh ein seif as the isser of a little bit. Libon Kal does not actually burn the absorption, rather it takes it out. After kashmir kli libon, kal nehagen ladich is a kli b'mayim tzedek. The minhag is to give the vessel a cold rinse. But the halacha is when you kasher with fire, you do not have to wait 24 hours before kashering. When it comes to kashering with water, you have to wait 24 hours to make sure that the taste that's absorbed in the walls is going to be a spoiled taste. So when it goes out into the vessel, into the water, it's not going to reabsorb and make the vessel not kosher again. But when it comes to fire, it's going to burn in its place, or even if it's not burning in its place, it's going to burn it up. And therefore, it's not a problem. Halacha Yud Zayin, Kalim Shenispashal B'Hem Israel Mayim, vessels that became usher through water, through the reitev or liquid, mara, any kind of liquid substance, a soup, going kedera, for example, a pot. Also a spoon, one stuck inside a pot that was on the fire. Imtafshal is with a forbidden food, then that could be kosher through Hagala. Just like the Isser, the absorption was absorbed through water, so too, the forbidden taste gets purged the same way. Any questions? I want to tell one more story. Okay, we'll stop at Halacha Yudches. Tell one more story. There were these two great Torah scholars. Great Torah scholar, then there was a Chassidish Rebbe. Rabbi Iyar was a great Torah scholar in the 1930s. He was the leader in the Litvisher community. He was ambidextrous. He could write two letters, one with his right hand, one with his left hand at the same time. A brilliant man. Anyway, so he met the Astasava Rebbe. The Astasava Rebbe was a small person, but a tremendous tzaddik. But he says to him, let me hear you say something. Say some words of Torah for me. So he tells him over words from the Torah. So then the Chaim Moses says to the Asasava Rebbe, he says, Mr. Agav Rabbi, he says, you're a great man. So the Asasava Rebbe says to him, from them, that's what makes a person a great man. I'll tell you how someone becomes great. He tells him a story in the Gemara. The Gemara in Makkah says, and when it comes to giving lashes, the Torah says, you give 40 lashes. Agom Yakenu. For someone who did something wrong, right? So the Chachamim learn out up to 40, meaning only 39. So the Gemara says there that how great are the rabbis that they have the power to darshan in the Torah itself. The Torah says 40, and they learn it's up to 39. So it says if you're standing up for a Sefer Torah, when they pick up the Torah by Hagbah, how much more so you're supposed to stand up for a Talmud Chacham. So he says to the rabbi, he says, I don't understand, you have the same exact teaching when it comes to Sfiras Omer. It's a story that belongs to this time of the year. It says in the Torah, Tishbaru Chamishim Yom, you have to count 50 days. And we count 49, up to 50. So we could have used that same lesson that the rabbis have the koyach, the darshan, and Torah. Therefore, we should respect them, etc. Why do we specifically derive the lesson from the story of the Makkos, right? In Maseches Makkos, about giving lashes. So he says, Avek Nemen, taking away one makkah, one lash from a Yida Russia. From them become that's what makes a person great. So much Abbas Yisrael that they took away one lash from a Yida Russia that makes them a Gavrava. Okay, Kabbalah Saltera B'Simcha B'Pnimius and all the brachos. The Shvois Mitzvah Hashem will come back after Shavuos.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Looks so nice.
Thanks.
There are many people notes in today's class. For halacha? I did my best. What do you need specifically? Because I don't know. Wanna look at what I have? Yeah, sure. Wait, I actually. In my notes from Priscilla's. I just sort of, I'm so tired. Urban. Yeah, urban work. Like, if you have a.
Is someone still in the dome?
Oh, like, that's looking at, some pottery, anything that's made out of like pottery, if you wanna.
Yeah, hi, let me just put that in, because you're saying the infiltrator.
System.
Well, it's a lot. Yeah, it says, it's kind of for an iPhone 11.
Hey, good morning. All classes today for Wish and Lena, for my father, having a surgery, I have surgery. Keep in mind.
I was like, I know that name, Conavela.
I know, my daughter's named after his mother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, yes, thank you. Oh, not yet, I'm so glad that you want that, because I want. Yeah, yeah, go with me now. Like, this, right? Okay, and then the other, like the first one, like the time where the thing is really tiny. I want to see if the first stuff is printed on like picture. Okay, yeah. But if you buy it, so excited. Thank you. And I have a lot of like, oh yeah, we also have it. Okay, yeah, it's so smart. Just put it in there and then you can put back to the end of here. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, great. So. You know, yeah, I mean. It is. My small. So.